Hi guys, welcome to today's tutorial. My name is Carmen and I'm going to be taking you through epoxy resin and how it is used. So basically, epoxy resin is a two-part chemical. Okay, it's a type of synthetic resin that is made of two different chemicals which are mixed before the resin forms a solid plastic. Good. Now, as I said, there are two chemicals. So anytime you purchase a resin or an epoxy resin, you're going to see an A and you're going to see a B. You need these two chemicals before you'll be able to get a solid plastic. And then epoxy resin is used in the production of plenty, a wide range of projects like keychains, notebooks, bookmarks, earrings, tables, trays, picture frames, so many things. There's a wide range of materials you can produce yourself once you learn how to make or mix epoxy resin. So as I said, they are made up of two chemicals. It's made up of the A and it's made up of the B. The A is always what we call the resin. Okay, so anytime you hear epoxy resin and you see A, the A component is the resin and then the B is the hardener. However, these two chemicals are not just poured into a mixing item and just mixed without you measuring it appropriately. And for the measurements, there are different types of measurements. So although there are different types of there are two different liquids for the epoxy resin, these two liquids are what we are going to combine to form a solid plastic. Even though they are already existing in two liquids, there are also different ways of measuring the resin we are going to work with. And for that, we call them the ratios. So the ratio of the resin basically defines the quantity you are going to pour for each component and mix to get the solid plastic you are looking for. Great. So as I said, there are different ratios out there. The first ratio is the 1-to-1 ratio. So I'll write it on the screen so that when you see it, you know what we are looking at. So with 1-to-1 ratio, the quantity you pour for the A is the same thing you're going to pour for the B. In other words, the quantity you pour for the resin is the same quantity you're going to pour for the hardener. So let's say you use let me get a cup. Good. So let's say you use this cup to do your measurements, okay, and you are working with a 1-to-1 ratio. The quantity you are going to pour for the resin should be the same thing you pour for the hardener. So if you are pouring this full cup of resin, this cup here, you are pouring full cup of resin. Let's say it is 50 ml of resin. You pour 50 ml of hardener. That's basically it. So for 1-to-1, the quantity for the resin is the same as the quantity you pour for the hardener. However, with the 2-to-1, you're going to divide the quantity you pour for the resin by 2. In other words, you're going to divide it and or you're going to get half the quantity for the resin and pour the results for the hardener. Great. Let me use the same cup to demonstrate. So if you pour this full cup of resin, you're going to pour half the quantity you pour for the resin for the hardener. So with this full cup of resin, let's say this full cup here is 50 ml of resin. After pouring your 50 ml of resin into your bigger mixing cup, you are going to get half that quantity, which is 25 ml of what hardener, and add it to the resin you poured into your bigger cup initially. Basically, if you are pouring 2 cups of resin, half of 2 is 1. So you only pour 1 cup of hardener on top of it. If it is 6 cups of resin, half of 6 is 3. So after pouring your 6 cups of resin, you get 3 cups of hardener and add it to it. That's basically it. So you realize that with 2-to-1, you're only working with half the quantity you poured for the resin. Now with 3-to-1, you're going to divide by 3. So basically, the ratios out there available for resin crafting or resin artists to use is 1-to-1, 2-to-1, and 3-to-1. Good. So with 3-to-1, you divide by 3 using the same process we did for the 2-to-1. So basically, you are also not the one going to tell yourself the ratio to use for the project you are doing. It comes with the product label. The products will tell you which ratio it's used or is supposed to be used to mix it. So if you buy a resin, you can either request for the ratio that you want, or you purchase the ratio the supplier has available and work accordingly. So I'm going to be showing you in this video how to mix the resins and then how to work with it. Before you start working on any projects with epoxy resin, you have to have some few items available that you are going to be working with. The most important one that you have to have as a resin artist is the gloves. So you always have to protect your hands from the chemical because resin is actually very poisonous if it is ingested. So here I'm putting on two gloves to protect both hands from the chemical. It's very normal to have it come on your skin. Normally, some people even put on long sleeves even after they've put on their gloves so that it protects the skin from the chemical as well. So here I'm using this silicone cap to do the measurement. One thing about silicone caps is that whenever you work with a silicone cap, you can peel the resin after it has cured within the cap. When I say cure, I mean the resin hardens within the cap. Okay. So these caps come with inscriptions, which makes it very, very easy, whether you are a beginner or not, to measure your resin liquid appropriately for mixing. So with this one here, this is a 50 ml cap, meaning it's the maximum quantity it can take is a 50 ml of resin or any liquid at all. So I'm going to be pouring the quantity that I will need for the project I am doing. So for today's project, I don't need too much resin, okay? I don't need too much resin. So whenever you're working on a small project, you pour a small amount of resin, but always make sure that the quantity you pour is based on the ratio of the products you are working with. So with this one, I'm only going to be pouring 10 ml of resin, and then for 10 ml, this is a 2-to-1 resin. So for 10 ml, I'll only need 5 ml of hardener. Okay. So after 10 ml of resin has been poured, I'm going to add 5 ml of hardener on top of it, making it 15 ml in all. Do you understand? Great. So that's basically what I'll be doing for the pouring before the mixing will begin. So now once I am sure of the quantity of resin and hardener I'm going to need for the project, I'm going to move on to pour the quantity that I have already prepped my mind to work with. So these resins come already sealed. This helps with easy transportation and also to protect the chemical from any filth or anything like that. So I'm going to start by pouring 10 ml of the resin. One thing you should always keep in mind about measuring your resin is that you should always stick very closely to the ratio. Always work exactly as the product label is instructing you to. If you are supposed to pour 10 ml of resin, you pour that. Don't pour a millimeter or a milliliter more because that is going to affect the curing stage of the resin. So on top of that, I'm adding my 5 ml of hardener as I already described earlier to complete the 2-to-1 ratio. And then some mistakes some people make is that because it is called a hardener, they feel pouring more of it is going to make the project cure faster or cure into a small solid plastic, but it does not work that way. Once the pouring was done, I wiped my mixing stick. So now you're going to stick to mixing in a single direction slowly. Now, the main reason why you're supposed to mix in a single direction and slowly as well is that mixing in multiple directions or mixing in a clockwise and an anti-clockwise manner is only going to trap in more air bubbles, and that is one thing you do not want to see in the resin you have mixed. You make sure you mix in a single direction and mix slowly as well, because mixing too fast is also going to trap in more of the bubbles as well. So once you start to mix your epoxy resin, you realize that the resin turns foggy. It turns very foggy, which is perfectly normal. You know, we are working with chemicals, so immediately they start to react with each other. They become very, very foggy. So when your resin starts to look foggy, it is not a bad sign. It's just clearly telling you that the resin has started to react with the hardener. So basically, you're going to mix in that same direction continuously. So normally some resin artists will tell you when it turns clear like water, you stop, but that's not what I'm going to advise you to do. So to be able to know the mixing time of the resin you are working with, you have to know the working time of the resin as well. When I say working time, I mean the duration you have to be able to work with the resin. The working time is the same as the pot time, and they basically define the time you have to be able to mix your resin, add your pigments, your fillings, and whatever before the curing stage will begin. And I said earlier that to cure means to harden. So the curing stage is the stage where the resin begins to harden after it has been mixed with the hardener. Great. So for you to be able to know the working time of the resin you are working with, it either comes with a product label or you yourself can devise it. So if your resin has a working time of 1 hour as stated on the product label, it means you are going to mix for about 8 to 10 minutes because there is enough timing for you to use to work with the resin. However, if the resin has a shorter working time of about 20 minutes, 15 minutes, you mix for about 2 minutes, basically waiting for it to clear out like water before you stop mixing. Because that way, there's not enough time to be doing your mixing and then pouring into the mold. So one thing about working time is that if you do not get your working time correctly, what happens is that the resin doesn't mix very well. And then at times, if you overmix too, the resin can what harden into the cup whilst you are even still mixing the resin. So you should always be very mindful of your working time and then always mix appropriately. So once the mixing has been completed, now you can pour it into the mold you are supposed to be working with. So for this mold, all I did was to pour a reasonable quantity of the resin into it. So for this project, I'm not adding any colorants, just to let you see how clear the resin looks when it is mixed properly. So I poured a reasonable quantity into each of the cavities of the mold just to make sure it was full enough before proceeding to the next cavity. So pouring the resin into the mold is actually one of the most satisfying parts of the project because all you are doing is to just pour. And then I like to pour very slowly because it makes it, I don't know, it makes it playful. Okay, so with pouring your resin, just play around with it. When we proceed into the series of the uploads where we are adding pigments, you see how easy it is to recreate pieces from your imagination by just adding colorants or glitters or whatever. Okay, so you basically just have to be creative about this. That's all. Just be a little creative and everything is going to turn out perfectly. So after pouring into the mold, another important factor or another important process is to pop the bubbles with the lighter. So when you are working with your lighter, you don't send it too close to the project you are doing, okay? The reason why you don't send it too close is that the flame can burn the mold you are working with. So you're basically going to keep it a distance away from the mold and just pass the lighter over the surface of the mold to pop the bubbles on top of the resin that you have poured into the mold. So it's perfectly normal to have bubbles in there. You just have to get rid of them. So once the resin was poured into the mold, I still had a feeling it was looking too plain. So to add a little bit of design and flair to what I poured initially, I got these PVC stickers, which are flowers, to add to the design with the help of my tweezers. So with the tweezers, you're just going to peel off the sticker from the backing, and then you're just going to dip it into the resin. So for this, you don't necessarily have to wait for the resin to cure. All you have to do is you just dip it into the resin, and with the help of the tweezers, you just tap it out and make sure the resin comes to the top of the sticker. So you are basically drowning the sticker into the liquid you have poured in the mold. So with this, you realize how pretty it's turning out eventually just with the help of some few stickers. Okay. So basically, I just place them into the resin or into the mold randomly without really calculating what I'm actually doing. Okay. So you just try and just go with the flow, just put in anything. Okay. So if you don't have these stickers, you can just get any decorative item, maybe some fillings, anything decorative. Okay, so for this project we are not working with any pigments. All we are doing is to just put in these little accessories, these stickers, anything you find in your home that you think would be perfect in the resin. You just put them in there and then you're good to go. Okay, so I did the same thing for the rest of the cavities. Just dropped it in with the tweezers, tapped on the surface a little and made it drown. I'm sorry I'm using the word drown, but yeah, I just made it drown. Okay. And then it just reflected in its own way a very beautiful, unique design, and that was just perfect. So this is how they all turned out. This is how pretty they look, even without pigments being added to them. And yes, so after this, you're going to wait for 24 hours, a minimum of 24 hours. Okay, so they get enough time to cure. Then that's when you're going to have to move on to demolding them. So this is it after 24 hours. I waited a full day and just let it breathe. Okay, I couldn't wait, so I demolded the last one, but the other three are here, and this is me demolding it. It's just a simple process. It's actually very refreshing. So you can have a look at how clear it is, and the flower is just doing its own thing. I mean, the sticker is just doing its own thing. It's very strong and not bendy. That's exactly what you are looking out for. It should be a solid piece, a solid piece. Okay. So I did demold the other pieces. You can tell how clear it's looking. You see, when there are bubbles in the resin you work with, you would see it. Okay. That's whether you're a beginner or not, you will clearly see it. So you can see how transparent it's looking. Okay. It's almost like just glass. That's the effect you are looking out for. So basically, after 24 hours, you would have seen the beautiful piece you had made. You can already tell with this, we didn't use any pigments, we just used the resin, which had been mixed with the hardener based on the right ratio. And then we just played around with sticker, and that's all. So you see how pretty these little things are looking right now. So from here, you can just add either a key ring, you can add a clip or anything. But for today's projects, we are basically just working with the resin and experimenting with it, and that's all. So from even this simple tutorial, you can tell how easy it is to recreate your own pieces by yourself in your home. And for this simple project, we only needed stickers. We also used the resin and the hardener. We needed the mold, we needed mixing stick, and then the mixing cup. And then we recreated or we created or produced these beautiful little things from them. So you just realize that it's very easy to be a resin artist. It's not difficult. In the subsequent tutorials, we'll be working on different projects and then adding different accessories to them to make them even more beautiful. Thank you so much for watching today's tutorial. Please don't forget to like this video, share to your friends and family who can learn something new from this. Subscribe, um, anything. Okay, and hope to see you in the next tutorial. Bye.